saying any swear words or being rude, as they used to say on Big Brother on Channel 4. So we'll keep it polite here for most of the time. So it's 6:30. It's time to relax. It's a long week. It's Thursday. We've passed the hump of the week. It's time. It's the end of January. Just been payday. Well, hopefully for most of us, and it really is time to open 3 lovely bottles of red, explore some red grapes. This is a nice informal session. It's more on the educational side of what we do at Honest Grapes, but I'm not the best educator in the world. I'm actually not just enjoy talking about wine. So ask lots of questions. I've got my 2 marvelous wine guru colleagues, Luke here, if Luke will wave, and Angus. And Luke and Angus are 2 of our wine gurus and look after our Premier Crew Club members. So any of you who think that Luke is a fictitious construct or a name on an email or just some mega corporation's fake person who they use to fob you off if your wine's late. No, Luke is real, and you can shout at him if your wine's late. But he's a nice guy, really, and we'll always do our best.
Yeah. That's why I've got my email address here.
That's it. That's why we all do our best to look after you. A few waves. I think everybody was on the. I think Jose's having problems joining. So I think all of you were on session 1, but can I just have a wave from everybody who's on session 1? Brilliant. Okay, so I'm not going to do my see it, sniff it, slurp it, savor it again, but if anybody wants me to run through it, I'll sort of do it informally on the first one. So to remind everybody, 4 stages of tasting wine: seeing it, which is looking at it tilted on the side like this, the rim and the core; sniff it, my rather large nose, stick that down into the bowl of the glass as I swill it around; slurp it, get a good slurp, Japanese noodle time, and then savor it. And savoring is going to be really important on these wines today. I've just had a go at those a little while ago. So you must, we're here to drink responsibly and enjoy ourselves, but have a drink, okay? We've got 3 lovely wines. If you haven't already, please pour all of them into glasses about 1/2 inch, 3/4 of an inch deep in your glass. And while I gabble on a bit about red grapes and red wines, please have a see it, sniff it, slurp it time for your Merlot. There's nothing worse for me than going to wine tastings where the first 3/4 of an hour is some snobby git talking about wine and not letting you drink some. So even I will have a sip while I'm speaking. I will screen share a few slides to get us started. If I'm clever enough to have actually found where I put them, here we are. And I've even starting from the wrong one. Let's see if I can get this going right.
That's probably my fault, yeah.
No, it's all me, don't worry. So we're going to talk about red wine. We're going to talk about types and styles of red wine, how red wine's made, some of the thousands of red grape varieties, but actually we'll be covering off about 8 of them during the rest of this series, and then going on to the wines. Again, as I said, Belle, Etoile, Merlot, to begin with, the Merlot Grape, Chianti Colisanessi, which is the Sangiovese grape from Italy, and then Grape Pinot Noir, does what it says on the tin, American Pinot Noir. So on the last session, I spoke about crisp white, fragrant white, rich white, and wild white as our 4 styles of white wines. And in red wines, we have a similar classification that we call light red, smooth red, hearty red, and wild red. So in terms of their characteristics as wines, the lighter style of red is low in tannin, and I'll talk about tannin. By the way, feel free to wave, stick things in the chat box, yell. I'll make sure I answer every question during this evening. So light reds tend to be low in tannin, tend to be fruitier, particularly when we talk about the Gamay grape, the Pinot Noir grape, but actually also this first Merlot, although actually it's maturing a bit. I call those a lighter style of red. A smooth red has got that lovely sort of silky, satiny, or velvety taste on the tongue. Difference in texture there caused by the amount of tannin and the overall development of the wine. A hearty red, or a bigger style of red, you'd think of as being a big, bold red, mouth-filling, voluptuous, very pleasing. and a wild red, a red that shows some sort of feral, furry, gamey notes. And that could also just be one of the other, it could be to do with the winemaking, or it could be to do with the age of the wine, it could be a bit older. Massive number of different red grape varieties, and literally I just pulled these off the website yesterday, and I've pulled these ones out separately: Cabernet Franc, Cabernet Sauvignon, Grenache or Grenache, Merlot, Pinot Noir, and Shiraz or Syrah, just as being sort of, I wouldn't just say the top 6 as it were, but 6 of the ones that you should really know something about. And we're going to be tasting 2 of those today, the Merlot Grape, and let me get it right, the Pinot Noir Grape. And then we're going to be also having Sangiovese. And then in the big reds in session 4 from the New World, we're going to be tasting Malbec. We're going to be tasting, I've got them here, we're going to be tasting Shiraz, and we're going to be tasting Carmenere. And I think in the next session, if I remember correctly, we should be tasting Monastrell. I've forgotten a couple of the wines from the next one, but definitely you've got Monastrell in the next one. So some great interesting varietals to taste there. So let's talk a little bit about, I'll leave that there, I'll leave it, okay, talk about this as well. So let's talk a little bit about how red wine is made, and it's made differently from white wine. I'm not going to get awfully technical here, although I'll answer technical questions. As most of you know, I'm a physicist, not an organic chemist, but I've seen lots of winemaking. White wine is generally made by pressing, you take the grapes, you squeeze them, you get what's called the must or the grape juice out, and you ferment it. But actually, not a lot of people know that actually most grapes, even grapes with black or blue or dark purpley skins, actually make a clear juice when you press them. So to make a red wine, what we actually need to do is to get all those lovely flavors, all those lovely tannins, all that lovely ripeness from the skin of the grape into the must, into the grape juice. And we do that either by leaving it for a few hours or a few days, which could be called a cold soak or something like that. But more often, we leave the skins in through the process of fermentation. And we even, in many cases, actually leave the stems of the grapes in as well. And now we get quite technical about what makes grapes ready to ferment and turn into a wine. And I know I said when we were talking about white wines last week that actually it's the conversion of sugar to alcohol that makes wine. And you get 2 types of ripeness in grapes. The ripeness like a fruit of bananas or cherries or grapes or grapefruit or anything else, when it goes from tart and green and acid to being sugary and plump to being rotten and horrible. And that we call our sugar ripeness. And then we have our second type of ripeness, which is called phenolic ripeness. And that's the ripeness of the proteins, of the structure, the tannins in the grapes. And actually, it can be quite a trade-off and quite difficult, particularly in the northern climates of Northern Europe, of France, Germany, and so on, and also in the southern climates of places like New Zealand. And it's easier to achieve in what we call New World territories. And New World territories we typically think of as being nearer to the sort of 33 degrees latitude, whereas we think of the Old World regions to be nearer to the sort of 40 degrees latitude. Also, because I knew somebody would ask me later, I'm doing my best to cover single varieties here. So in fact, we have a pure Merlot, a pure Sangiovese, and a very slightly not so pure Pinot Noir. It's got a little bit of stuff added at the end. But most of you will have heard of names like Bordeaux, Burgundy, Rhone, or even more exotically, the Hermitage. And I did want to cover them because often in red wine, you'll hear of these. And of course, these are brand names or names of styles of wines that are named after regions. But the French style is to blend varietals. And I've put up some of the most common ones here. When we talk about a Bordeaux blend, be it New World or Old World, the left bank of the Bordeaux, the left-hand side of the western side of the Gironde, typically Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, Petit Verdot, Malbec, a few other grapes there. And on the right bank, in Libourne side, you get dominated by Merlot and then Cabernet Franc. And notice, although we're not tasting a Cabernet Sauvignon or a Cabernet Franc today, the similarity of the names there. Cabernet Sauvignon being more hale and hearty, rumbustious, tannic, plush, blackberries, forest fruits type of wine, whereas Cabernet Franc exhibits, it's from the same family, but it gives you slightly more austerity, slightly greeny, black currant leaves, people will often describe both the smell and the taste. And those blends are used to create structure, elegance, and complexity in the wine. Good Burgundy is always just Pinot Noir. You get another red grape, the Gamay grape, grown in Burgundy, just as you do in the Loire Valley, but good Burgundy, always Pinot Noir. Rhone blends, the Northern Rhone, Syrah, Shiraz being the New World name for the same grape. And we will be tasting a Syrah, or in fact Shiraz, in the 4th session of Taste Lab Live. And then the Southern Rhone, dominated by three grapes, Grenache, Syrah, and Mourvèdre. And so that's GSM blend, or MGS or SGM, depending on what's dominant. I tend to think of it as GSM, because when I grew up doing marketing, it was grams per square meter in printing on different heavy weights of paper. The Hermitage blend, which you might hear named in the US or Australia nowadays, actually comes from an adulteration of Bordeaux wines, but people thought it was improving Bordeaux wines, to add Hermitage, which is actually a region of the Northern Rhone. They blended the Shiraz of Hermitage with Cabernet Sauvignon, with Bordeaux wine, to allegedly in those days to make it superior, to make it improve. So there you are. I'm going to talk about the first wine and then go back a bit to talk a bit more about red wines in general. So let's dig into the Merlot grape. Let's do our see it, sniff it, slurp it, savor it, so that we've got some wine touching our lips and swilling around our palates. The see it bit here is a little bit darker than I expected, and it's nice actually. We bought this wine a few months ago, and it's actually matured. It shows you wine can mature in screw cap. It's got a lovely sort of dark ruby color with a bit of thinning towards the edges, but it's lovely and brilliant and clear, very attractive sort of color in the glass. When I swill it around, does anybody want to comment on the smells that they get?
Good time to jump in with some fruit. You go and any fruit jumping out there? Anything in particular? There's got to be something, a bit of something red, bit of something.
Even just black fruit to red fruit.
Smells quite alcoholic.
It's I actually haven't got the ABV in front of me, but
it's 13 and a half.
13 and a half. Okay.
Yeah.
There we are. Okay, we've got some black currants. Yeah, I reckon there's a little bit of black currant in there. Definitely some plums for sure. I think that's a classic Merlot trait. Is nice ripe plums there, black and red possibly.
Yeah, it's interesting, jammy. I think, but it's almost like jammy's often referred as bad in wine. Sometimes you may think so, but the aroma of blackberry jam is actually a very attractive one. I think that's one that is in this wine, like a brambly kind of blackcurrant jam.
And I know I said it when we did the whites last week, but when you think about the fruits in wine, think about them going from being tart and green and acidic to being just underripe, to being ripe, to being slightly jammy, to being overcooked, to being scorched and burned. And as Angus says, this is it's ripe and it's just slightly on the nose, certainly, giving you that little bit of a young jam, really, of a jam it's not all burnt and scorched, but it's got just that slightly cooked, just lightly poached notes to it, poached plums. Luke, so that I can put this down, so I can put this slide down, let's show people where this comes from. And this is from the Pays d'Oc region. Do you want to explain that to people?
That's right, yeah. So we're around the town of Béziers, which is actually, it's almost right in the middle. You can see there, like the Coteau de Languedoc here is just north of there. And so it's inland a little bit. It has some.
Yeah, here we are. Here's the Coteau de Languedoc.
Yeah, that's the one.
Nice.
And so you can see the vineyard in the photograph there, typically picturesque, southern French medieval town, and yeah, that's the kind of landscape we're talking about. And so there's a little bit of influence from the Mediterranean, from the sea there. So it's obviously a warm part of France, but there's a little bit of a cooling influence coming off of the sea. And so that's kind of the key in that part of the world is what's the cooling influence? Plenty of sun, plenty of warmth, but there's some breeze coming off there in the summer in particular to stop it getting too hot. But it's a ripe wine. The grapes certainly don't struggle for ripeness.
And that's the very nice thing about these IGP wines, because we tend to think, and so PADOC is Indication Géographique Protégée, so it's protected regional area. It's a very large area, but what do we all know about the south of France? It's warmer there than it is here. It's a nice place to go and spend a holiday. The grapes get ripe. The grapes have a holiday there. And then they come back in a bottle here for us to drink. And that's exactly as it should be. In that region, they make a lot of very cheap varietal wines. But what we pick up for honest grapes tend to be the ones that have got a bit of something special to them, generally from smaller producers. And this one, I rather like. I'm a big fan. I don't know anybody else here. I'm a big fan of the Belle Epoque. So that sort of era, the flapping 20s and 30s, all of that, all of that sort of life in Britain, but very much originated in France as well. And they've picked up that theme of the sort of wine that would have been served in the tabacs, in the clubs in Paris in those days. And it is a very sort of decadent wine. How you can tell the difference, by the way, between this and the sort of equivalent supermarket style wine is that the supermarket style wine will be much simpler, much sweeter, much less savory and more dilute. And try it one day. Just go and buy a £6.99 wine and compare it with this, which is about double the price, about £13.30 on our website. And what you get here is quite a sort of pretty deeper than you'd imagine, actually, for this area. It's easy going, but there's lots of flavor. There's lots of layer to it, which is very nice. Now, in terms of the way that Merlot is grown, the name Merlot, we think probably comes from the mel, which is the blackbird. So it's the color it's that sort of blackbird color grape, basically. And it's sort of fleshy and early ripening. And that early ripening makes it go, that early ripening and that sort of fleshy plumminess to the smell and taste make an ideal counterpart with Cabernet Sauvignon, which is more tannic, more still later ripening. And it makes that ideal combination of Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot in Bordeaux wines. And that's also why around the world, Chile, Argentina, USA, Australia, they emulate that Bordeaux style of wine in the New World. We're going to be having 2 Old World wines and 1 New World wine today. So does anybody want to comment on what you think the difference is when just somebody like me just says, oh, well, here's an Old World wine, here's New World wine? Anybody want to have a guess at why we use that as a sort of throwaway way of describing wines?
It's an interesting one, isn't it? Yeah, I'd like to hear if anyone would like to jump in.
How much can I ask for?
Go on, you're being too quiet.
Yeah, right. Well, just
how long will it drink for?
This wine is what we call a vin de soif. So we bought it a few months ago. It's much better now than the day we bought it. It's really actually very, just like boldened itself out a bit, but it's a wine for drinking now to the next 9 months or so.
Okay.
It won't go off or anything, but it just won't improve. It'll lose its fruitiness. Now, how can I tell that? It's just, it's maximum attractiveness. It's not a highly acidic wine, so it's not going to be preserved by acid. So it's just sort of there to drink now.
That's it. I think the the main feature of the wine is the fruit. There's a little bit of something else I asked about herbs. I think there's a little bit of that kind of unavoidable garrigue that you often get in around the southern French coast. It's not necessarily associated with Merlot in particular, but I think there's a little bit of lavender, maybe rosemary, just something slightly savory that goes with the fruit, but it's not the sort of thing where you really want the fruit to drop off and develop too much savory character. So like Nathan says, it's made to be drunk relatively young, and I think it's just about where it should be now.
But what I like about it, compared with its sort of $6.99 supermarket equivalent, is that it's got those layers behind it, as Luke said, beyond the obvious ripe fruits like jamminess that Angus picked up. You've then got a core which is nicely fruity and deep. I think this would go very, very nicely with salads and sliced meats and things like that. It's an ideal sort of wine. And actually, on these winter days, I really like, I'm a big salad eater actually, so I think quite a lot of the salads I'm having, this will set off very nicely, because I tend to have those sort of salads where I'm putting a little bit of vinegar, like very small amounts of vinaigrette there, things which have got some chicken or some chorizo or sliced meat that go really well. So yeah, so quite a nice start. And actually why I chose this wine in particular was Merlot. I wanted to show you something where you'd go, oh, that's what Merlot tastes like. Back to New World, Old World. I do want to cover that, and it's important in these, for all wine, so it was important in whites, but even more so as we jump out on reds. When we describe that, it's a bit of a lazy way of explaining wine, and particularly with global warming, is turning a lot of the Old World into the New World. But essentially, the grapes grow best in latitudes between about 30 and about 45 degrees. I think that's right, Luke. I can never remember exactly, but it's something like that, okay? If it's too hot and tropical, there are exceptions, but if it's too hot and tropical, the vines don't close down properly in the winter. Remember, the vines is an annual, it's an annual thing, okay? They need to close down, they need to rid themselves, they need to refresh, they need to rid themselves of infection. That's why even a bit of freezing and stuff is pretty good for vines. They're quite hardy, the ones we want to make wines from anyway. And then as they bud and grow, we want them to be vigorous, but we want them to produce lots of fruit and not too many leaves. And that's why we want older vines, which are producing more but smaller and more intense fruit, which produces less grape juice, but more intense grape juice when we squeeze them. But as it gets cooler, as we move up towards northern France, well, actually even into sort of Burgundy and then Champagne, Chablis, Loire, whatever. And then, of course, the UK, Canada, places like that. And then Southern Hemisphere down into New Zealand, it actually gets cold enough that it becomes a problem to ferment the grapes. It can become a problem for them to fully ripen. And in fact, the history of why is Bordeaux and Burgundy so austere and woody and boring for most British tastes, and why was English wine undrinkable until a few years ago? It's just because the increased warmth provides more what are called degree days. It's a way we describe the number of days between the grape budding and flowering in particular through to the harvest, which is usually, I think, 100 days or so, Luke, if I remember it right. You've been doing your diploma recently, but it depends a little bit on latitude, but it's roughly 100 days, and then you count how many degrees it is over those days.
Yeah, during the growing season. So basically spring to autumn. Yes,
exactly, spring to autumn harvesting. If you are on the plumper side of that, it's easier for the winemaker to get both types of ripeness at the same time, or to aim for that, to get the sugar ripeness and the fruit ripeness. If you're right in the north, you get sugar ripeness well before you get the protein ripeness. So it gets much harder to harvest, and that's why wines like Burgundy are so tricky and expensive. And I'll say that as we come to Pinot Noir.
That's the thing. I'll just jump in there, and it's quite a big kind of concept to fully get to grips with, and without going into too many details, it's quite difficult to describe. But the the real kind of fine wine regions of the world tend to be where there's that tension between just about getting things ripe on good years, as opposed to, a lot of people would think, why don't you just grow grapes somewhere where it's really reliable, really hot, really sunny, you'll be fine. It has its own drawbacks, as we've already mentioned. Things can get too baked and too cooked, but those latitudes where there is a tension between reaching ripeness and not over ripeness is that's kind of the key. And there are various influences that move that point of latitude up and down, and how you can make wine. But that makes wine interesting, basically, that there's an amount of tension there between achieving the ripeness and how you get there.
That really hit home for me when I went on a 3-week wine tour of Chile, Argentina, and Uruguay. In Chile, it's not hot, but it's just dry and sunny. The soil is more productive, which is a bad thing for wine. Vines like to grow on quite poor, impoverished soil, makes them fight for their minerals. But the regularity of the seasons, the predictability of it, makes it much easier to grow good winemaking grapes, and also the cheapness of the land as well makes it more cost effective, and that's why you get large volumes of very good production from the New World. And we'll cover 1 today and 3 in the 4th session. Let's move on now to our second wine, and if you have got this to hand, this is the Chianti Colisanessi from one of our great friends, Filippo Chia of Castello Romitorio. So this is very beautiful. I mean, these, by the way, this series from this producer, Castello Romitorio, are fabulous to give to people as gifts. Very well priced wines. I think this one is £16.50, which is you'll see when I explain it. It's a very aristocratic wine for that price. And actually, the artwork on the labels comes from the family who owns the estate. So we're on the Sangiovese grape. Let me talk about Sangiovese first of all. Why do Sangiovese when it's not one of those 5 top famous red grapes? Well, actually, it is for Tom and myself and Fronis Grapes, because we're big Italian wine freaks. And so an evening without Sangiovese, hey, you don't have too many of those. I've also deliberately put it between Merlot and Pinot Noir, because there are some interesting transitions and correlations. So get some in your glass. So Sangiovese is one of about 3,000 what are called autochthonous or locally named grape varieties that comes from the Latin Sangius Jovis, the blood of Jupiter. It's very much grown in central Italy, although, and I've just been gabbling on about the New World, I've had some really interesting Sangioveses made in Australia recently as well. Anywhere else in the world it's grown, right? Must be, it's very, very picked up grape. But definitely Tuscany, and we're in the heartland, Tuscany here, but also grown in Campania and Sicily. Chianti, a name you should have heard of from Tuscany. Chianti Colisanessi is a very, very weird sub name for Chianti. So it's a higher level than Chianti on its own, but it's not a Chianti Classico or Chianti Coliseum, which are the top 2 levels of Chianti. Chianti Colisanessi is actually made up of about 40 different areas in northern and southern Tuscany. And in fact, here we're in the southern bit around Montalcino. So Chianti Shire, Tuscany, the northern bit around Siena is where you get Chianti. And we're now near Montalcino, where you get Brunello di Montalcino. So what's special about this wine is Chianti Colisanessi is a sort of catch-all name for high quality Chianti from about 40 different areas of Tuscany. But really weirdly, they're not all joined together. It's not sort of one large area. It's 40 different bits, some of which touch one another. Sangiovese has been known since the 16th century. Most famous wines made from it are Chianti and Brunello di Montalcino, but there were quite a lot of other wines made from Sangiovese. In particular, when you look on our website, you'll see Vino Nobile di Montepulciano and also Morellino di Scansano. a Morellino di Scansano, a particularly brilliant example of that, called Giacoforte. If Luke or Angus can stick those up in the chat box so you can see, actually made by the same producer, Castello Romitorio. So why do I say that this is an aristocratic wine? So the story of the place is really weird. That it's a castle that's of Roman origin. It became a monastery, and then was sold in 1984 to the artist Sandro Chia in exchange for 5 of his paintings. So there you are. If you want to get your own estate in Tuscany, you just better be a good painter and know how to haggle. Okay. Sandro Chia is a neo-expressionist painter, brilliant style of painting, used as a studio, but the vineyards around were so good that he decided he wanted to preserve the tradition of making a Brunello di Montalcino. And his son, Sandro, joined the business in 2005. And then Filippo Chia, who's the guy we work with, started talking to us about these amazing Brunellos that weren't being represented in the UK, and could we do something with them? And so again, the Brunello di Montalcino, a single vineyard version called Filo di Seta, a reserva, which in Italian and most countries is about storing it longer in the oak casks, in this case Botticandi, large oak casks. Those are their top wines, but they also make something called a Rosso di Montalcino, which is Rosso. Brunello is the term, as you'd imagine, for brown. So it's the sort of darker style. It's not really brown, okay? The Rosso di Montalcino is made from younger vines and has a more cherry red expression of Sangiovese. So stylistically, it's different from Brunello. But actually, according to the weird Italian laws of production, when you've got your vineyards, however good they are, you're only allowed to make so much Brunello di Montalcino, and then in a ratio, only so much Rosso di Montalcino. Everything that's left over, most people blend in with Syrah or something else to make an IGT wine, or a Super Tuscan. If you heard the name Super Tuscan, it's often Sangiovese with something else, what we call an international grape, like Syrah or Cabernet Sauvignon, added to it. He does that, and he does that with his Romitorio wine. But with this one,
I'll just put the link. Sorry to interrupt. Just put the link for all the Romitorio wines. Okay. I think we must be waiting on some more stock of the Morellino di Scansano.
The Morellino, we've just put a new order in. Yeah.
Worth clicking on there just to look at the some of the artwork on the bottles, because
they're just beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we ran out of the Morellino di Scansano over Christmas, and we've just put an order in for some more. Mm-hmm. The Chianti Colisanessi is basically Brunello di Montalcino, but at a third of the price, and that's why I say it's an aristocratic wine. He's not allowed to make so much wine and call it Brunello, so that the next bit down he calls Rosso di Montalcino, and the next bit down, slightly younger vines and so on, he then calls Chianti Colisanessi. So let's share the screen. I think I probably told you more or less everything that's going to be on this, but let's have a look. So we've made sure we've covered it. Here we are. So Sangiovese grapes, and there we are in.
So yeah, I don't know if you can make that any bigger at all. Yeah. So there's the you've obviously got the chunk taken out there of Tuscany, and then around the river you have Florence on the river, which isn't marked there. But yeah, it's a bit too small. The third, the most northern brown portion there is Chianti Colisanessi. Then you have Montalcino is the middle one, and then I've actually forgotten. I can't read it. What the
There's Morellino di Scansano.
It's Morellino. Okay.
It's so small, my eyes can hardly see that. So I don't know if you.
Yeah, I think the hills above Siena, which is where we are for the majority of that, is they often get very picturesquely covered in mist as well.
So on the now, this is this is why I'd like you to have 3 glasses for these tastings. It's very instructive to go backwards and forwards. You should get a different look to the wine when you see it, and a very, very different smell to the wine. So please dig in and tell me what you think. Please pipe up. I want to hear you talking about it, or stick some comments in the chat box. So first of all, is this paler or deeper in color than the Belle Etoile Merlot that we had first? Look at the
It's
rim.
paler. It's paler.
Paler, that's Yvonne, is it? Thank you.
Yeah.
John, I can see you holding it up, but the way to do it is tilt it on its side. See, like this. Don't pour it all over your lap, unless you have a particularly thirsty dog. But tilt it so that you can see the rim here and the core in the center. And ideally over a white serviette or piece of paper.
Pinky, and the other one's lighter.
Got the two there. Yeah, hopefully it'll be should be a fair bit paler and just a little bit less sort of a deep red.
Yeah.
More like you said, but Brunello is brown. There's often there's a bit of age involved in that, but generally the Sangiovese grape has pretty thin skins, so not too deep on the color.
Yeah, but it's got a real sort of even though this is only a couple of years old. This is, I've got 2018 here, I think. Yep.
Yeah, I think
Even though it's only a couple of years old, it's got a very slight sort of pinky, not brown yet, but pinky tinge. So it's actually showing already a little sign of age. Yes, Patrick saying the color fades at the edges much more. Yeah, definitely, Patrick, drops off. But still very brilliant, but it's just a much more sort of delicate color and definitely more translucent in the core, in the center. So now let's swill it around in our glasses and get a big schnozzle full of that bouquet.
Yeah.
Now you should get a very different smell on this from the first one. And we are 0.5% of alcohol up with this one. We're at 14 degrees of alcohol.
How long is it in oak for?
This one, I don't know with this one.
I think it's normally got 12 months in big old barrels. Yeah.
Yeah. So this one will be in the what are called Botti Grandi, and they'll be in old oak. So they're not trying to give it any greenness of sap or newness of oak, big oak flavor. What they're just doing is what's called micro-oxidation. So it's just allowing it to age as it matures.
Excellent. I'm pleased when these come in there with red cherry. I think that's the key generally with Sangiovese. It's almost across Italy for reds. I think just about any.
Yeah. So if you're doing your exam and you said what's the difference between Merlot and Sangiovese, it would be plums and cherries. And then it's a question of how ripe they are. But I do like that, Wingley. Red cherry, red currant.
Definitely red currant, I think, as well.
Woody, peppery. I don't think we should overplay the oak influence here, by the way. This is not a big oaky wine. The oak that's being used is neutral. So in fact, what you're getting, and I think I described this on the whites last time, we talk about primary, secondary, and tertiary as wines age. The primary nature is obviously the fruit of the grape. The secondary nature of wine is the aromas that come from the style of winemaking, and the tertiary aromas are those that come from age. And actually, this has already got a little bit of tertiary on it, very pleasantly. It's still quite young. This will last. So I think it was Yvonne who asked on the first one. Was it you, Yvonne, who asked how long it'll last? This one will last. I can drink it now. It's beautiful. I would happily drink this in 5 or 7 years' time. Wouldn't keep it a lot longer than that. So it's got a good time to age. But the Italians would drink it at this stage to maybe another year or so. It's not a Van der Swaff, a sort of light, gluggable drinking wine like the first one, but it's definitely a wine that's going to go beautifully with all of those ragouts. If you're having your venison ragout, anybody having venison ragout for supper? No? Okay. I was about to invite myself round. I'll wear PPE or a face mask or something. I could do with venison ragout.
I think a good point on that one. The Italians generally, or if it's one of these kind of classic Italian reds, they often have that kind of structure and something that's on the relatively serious side, or because it spends, they almost always spend some time in the big old oak barrels, then they can certainly age for a while, and they're less forward on the fruit, and they have that balance as well with the savoury characters. So they can sit in a dusty cellar for a few years and probably improve for quite a long time and not really deteriorate. So they're just different characteristics, really.
Yeah, so it's a definite characteristic of Italian red wines, or even actually Italian white wines, but Italian red wines are big on everything. They're big on tannin, although this one isn't actually. This is sort of somewhere in the middle there. They're big on acidity. They're big on flavour, and it means they're food wines. This is not the sort of wine you just want to drink on an empty stomach and have nothing with it. It's the sort of wine that you want to savour and enjoy. And really, joking aside, in terms of venison ragout, there aren't that many wines that go well with meat and tomatoes. And so all of those sort of bolognese sauces and things like that go beautifully together with it. In fact, yesterday I had an anchovy, and well, it wasn't quite puttanesca, but I had a anchovy and chili based pasta sauce, which I had when I started this. So it was really very nice with that. And actually that went very well. And the fact that it was anchovies, black olives, a bit of chili in there, tomatoes and pasta, very, very nice combination. So it's what goes with tomatoes and wine, a very difficult combination, including sort of cooked tomatoes as well.
I don't know if we said it last week. The kind of cliche is what grows together goes together, but I think never more true than with Sangiovese, but with Italian reds generally. It's unavoidable. If someone says, "Well, what would you eat with this?" and something Italian always springs to mind first. You can't help it.
Wonderful. So, do we have any more questions on Italian reds and Sangiovese? I'm going to stick my neck out there and say, and we're big fans of this producer of Filippo Chia of Castello Romitorio. We're actually just about in the next week or so going to do a fresh offer of his wines, mainly the Brunello 2016s. We're just going to get onto those. And I have to say that these are amongst the most exciting. They've been extremely well picked up by the critics in the last year. Even this level of wine at sort of £16, they're often picking up 92 to 94 points from people like James Suckling. I think they're tremendous value. And actually, some people make wines with such ugly packaging, ugly labels, and boring, that it's a bit of a pity because the wine is so much better than the label. In this case, the label and the wine go nicely together. And I often have like a couple of cases of these wines in the days when you can go to people for dinner parties. It's lovely to be able to go to a dinner party with people or send people as a gift a wine that's got a beautiful label. And I think the fact that it is an artistic family, that the wines fully justify the labels fully justify the wine.
Yeah, I think just on that, I think what justifies it in a good way is the fact we keep our sommelier selection, our wine shop, relatively small. But we pretty much take every wine. So we try to limit the amount of wines on our list, but we pretty much take every wine we can from Romitorio just because they're all so good, and they all offer different areas around Tuscany. So I think it's testament to how good each individual wine is in general.
That's it. Yeah, it's a bit of a statement how many we've got, like you said. Yeah, you don't see too many producers where we have that many different labels.
Exactly, and they're all completely different wines, every single one. So it makes it easy.
Absolutely.
Oh, you can tell. You mean you can tell it from the label?
Exactly.
Well, that helps. That always helps. Yeah, distinguishable from a distance. Yeah.
So, in fact, on that note, what I'm going to do, and please feel free to start pouring the last wine, is just show you those couple of things. So, how what we're talking about relates to finding these wines on our website. So, under Wine Shop, we have our sommelier selection, and the sommelier selection, I can easily go from that into red wines, for example. But here is the sommelier selection, and all I have to do is skim down here. And in this case, I could go, where are my grapes? I could go and find my grapes here. or my region, in this case being Tuscany, or indeed my producer, where's my producer gone, in my grower, and I can just search there. So I can find Castello Romitorio. Here we are. Here are the 6 wines in the sommelier selection from Castello Romitorio. So those would then show up in a minute. So it makes it easy to navigate and find them. But you'll also see, here's the producer, and here are the wines that we currently have available. If you then go in to styles, and I'm particularly going to keep emphasizing styles, that light red, smooth red, hearty red, and wild red, I should be able to find in wine style down here. So here we are, the smooth red and rosé under this category. Well, I actually think this one hails slightly on the side of a wild red. It's got a sort of slightly feral bit to it. When I said we're going to be offering Brunello di Montalcino next week, or certainly in the next fortnight, you'll find those under club offers. And the difference between club offers and sommelier selection is sommelier selection wines are available immediately, whereas the club offers, we take everybody's orders and then put them in and collect them from the estate. Here is Burgundy 2019 somewhere, which I'll talk about in a minute when we talk about Pinot Noir. And then somewhere down here, because they should be going onto the website now, are Brunello 2016.
I think at the top, actually, Nathan.
Oh, was it at the top? I skimmed right past it. There you are.
There you go.
There you are. Brunello 2016 new releases. And in fact, we have 5 producers. Valdicava won't release until the autumn, although we have some back vintages. Romitorio, Mastriani, Argiano, and Cortonese, I think it is.
Cortonese, yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Okay, that we're introducing for the first time this year. So we will have all of those Tuscan wines at a high level and at a moderate level. Then before I leave this, I do want to show you, for those of you who haven't yet booked for sessions 3 and 4, most of you have got all 4 sessions, so you can endure me with my illustrious colleagues Angus and Luke for 2 more weeks. But if you haven't booked sessions 3 and 4, they're available on the website, and you find those under events. And there will be the recordings on YouTube, so you can pick up and re-listen to me if you want to have even more of me, or if you want as gifts to have the ones where you don't have a live tasting, but you get a video associated with the bottles, in fact, half bottles in that case, sent to you. We have the Taste Lab kit. I think it's worth pointing out because it's my happy place, and I've got a picture of them behind me. We've just yesterday added 2 masterclasses on Clemens Busch from Germany, so Rieslings, one which has got 4 dry wines for £89, and one that includes one of the top Ausleser sweet wines for 120. And you can see a Taste Lab Kit 4, Taste Lab Kit 6, and a luxury one, which has got Champagne and Bordeaux and Burgundy in it. So with that little sales pitch in there, to give you the overall picture, we'll go on to our 3rd wine now.
Plenty to be getting on with. Same with the Meet the Grower tastings. They're all super exciting. And obviously we've got a bit of a Burgundy theme running for the next, only for 2 or 3 weeks, isn't it? And
I ought to come back to that, oughtn't I? Let's try and do that.
Probably ties in with Pinot Noir quite well. So
yeah, that's it. So let's talk about Pinot Noir. So pour your 3rd glass, and I will say something about that. So we are completely, let's go back to sharing the screen, make sure I do that properly. We are completely buzzed out and enjoying ourselves at the moment because it is Burgundy time. I don't know if you've heard of the phrase en primeur. That's E-N and then P-R-I-M-E-U-R. En primeur means the fresh season, in its first flush, as it were. And it's the new season of wines. And we typically would apply that to Bordeaux and Burgundy. En primeur is, for us as consumers, it's a way of buying what effectively it's a future in the wine. The wine is still at the producer, it's not bottled yet, but we get a discount from it on it by paying up front, basically. It's also a massive swindle propagated by the French to get good cash flow because they don't have to they get their money before they bottle it and send it to us. But in Bordeaux and Burgundy, it's a particularly effective way of building a collection of wine. In Bordeaux, because the wine tends to go up in value between the en primeur season and the time when it's made available 2 years later as a physical wine. In Burgundy, it's but for that reason of a discount effectively, but it's also because Burgundy is made in tiny parcels of land and it's so hard to get hold of that a lot of the wines actually sell out in the first sale. We are 4 weeks into our sales of Burgundy 2019, so it's the beginning of 2021 now. These will be delivered in about a year's time, so in the spring of 2022. Some of them will be delivered in the autumn of this year. And we have 3 marvelous tastings coming up with 3 of our top producers, Jane Eyre, Romain Topinot from Domaine Topinot Merme, and Etienne de Monti and the winemaker Brian Sive, who are presenting to us on the 16th, 18th and 23rd of February. And in these ones, you'll get samples of wine delivered in test tubes to you so that you can try, I think it's 6 wines in each pack.
6 for all of them, yeah.
Yeah,
It's a good range.
And these are sort of grower masterclasses where we'll actually have the producers on Zoom with us and you'll be able to dig into their wines. These are 3 of our top producers. Jane is what's called a micro-negociant. Her name really is Jane Eyre. She was an Australian hairdresser in Gippsland near Melbourne and now farms in Burgundy and in Australia. Romain Topinot, one of the most famous producers of the Côte de Nuit in Moray-Saint-Denis, where he lives, very famous maker of Gevrey Chambertin, Nuit Saint-Georges, Moray-Saint-Denis, Clos de l'Ombre, places like that. And Etienne de Monti, producer in the Côte de Beaune, in the southern part of the famous Côte d'Or, the Golden Slope, southern Burgundy, making red wines from Pommard, Volnay and Beaune, and white wines from Pouligny-Montrachet and Meursault, but also a number of other appellations. Oh, Beaune as well, which is very much going up in the world. So please have a look, and that's all under our events page, basically.
Yeah. It's also worth noting, I think, Nathan, that we're going to be trying 6 wines, going to be right from regional or village level, right up to Grand Crus and Premier Crus as well. So it's going to be a really good range of what they offer. I think even there's a Charmes Chambertin by Topinot Merme.
Yeah, that's it. So yeah, although you're getting 18 wines there, right up to bottles that are sort of 100, 150 pounds a bottle to try. So it's a bit of a unique experience.
Very exciting, yeah.
So we'll go on to our 3rd wine now. We're sort of on time, so we're just sort of going over time. So I'm going to do this fairly quickly. This is Gracebridge Pinot Noir from California. In fact, it's a blend of 2 areas, Monterey County and Sonoma County. Sonoma County being just north of San Francisco, and Monterey County being to the south and slightly east. There's a little bit of a cheat here because depending on the vintage, they put about 3% of the Syrah grape in there, and sometimes another grape called Alicante Bouschet, but the predominant thing here is Pinot Noir. I think it's a bit of an American cheat to put other grapes into Pinot Noir. You typically think of Pinot Noir as a grape that doesn't blend with other wines. The reason they do it is because the heat of the American West Coast can often lead to a wine that is a little bit. We think of an old world Pinot Noir like a Burgundy as sour cherries, a bit of raspberry perhaps. Very deft, quite acidic. But with the heat of California, they often end up with something that can end up tasting too much like Diet Dr. Pepper, tasting slightly artificial, slightly cherryish, slightly cooked. What they do here is they pick slightly earlier to get something that's slightly greener, a little bit better balanced. It's a 5th generation wine producer, which is a long time in California, based in Lodi in the Central Valley. But by adding that little bit of Syrah, some people add a bit of Tempranillo, not this producer. In this case, sometimes a bit of Alicante Bouschet. What they're doing is darkening the wine a bit, adding a bit of pepper, but very little. I think it changes the taste in this case, very little. So I'll see it. Again, a brilliant wine, nose clear, pretty satisfying. And I think that something you should pick up on this is a sweetness of nose. It's a plumpness that the grapes reach when they're fully mature, a sweetness that you often don't get on an old world Burgundy. By the way, look on our website for the Pinot Noir from Hoffman and Rathbone in the UK. There are some brilliant Pinot Noirs being made. Who else's Pinot Noir do we offer, Angus?
In the UK?
Yeah.
I think it's just Hoffman and Rathbone at the moment. We did have Gusbourne before.
We've done Gusbourne as well, yeah.
Yeah.
So there's starting to be some really good red still wines in the UK, all an effect of, you know, maturity but and a bit of global warming, I guess. So I think very pleasing wine. It's showing the sort of just a bit of sour cherries there, although I think more on the sweet side. That's that New World characteristic. One of our most popular wines, and the alcohol on here is 13.5%, so it's not over alcoholic. You can get Pinot Noir 15% in Carneros, which is the area that if you think of Napa Valley and Sonoma, they're linked by an area called Carneros or Los Carneros. It's about an hour's drive north of San Francisco, if any of you are there. I've been there a lot on technology business, so I spend lots of time around there. Can be very pleasing. If you're going these areas, Lodi, further down south in Southern California, but also up in the Anderson Valley and Russian River Valley, can make much more pleasing, slightly cooler climate Pinot Noirs. So very interesting ones. So with any comments on that wine, that last wine? Should I get out the map? I'm conscious that we've reached half 7 and you might be wanting to get your supper. So I'll just briefly show that and then open the floor to more questions.
Like you said, this is one of our most popular wines. I think, well, hopefully everyone else would agree, but you can see why. It's very, it's a very nice, easy drinking Pinot, but at the same time, there's plenty going on. I think it's that sweet spot of not being too full, but it's plush and ripe enough and ticks lots of boxes, basically. Just quickly go over the map, Nathan. You mentioned quite a few places here already, but the reason the map spans over such a wide area is because it is a blend of those two AVAs of Sonoma to the north of San Francisco, and then Monterey just down to the south. So Scotto Cellars is the producer, and they make some reasonably large volumes of wines, and then they have different labels. And this is obviously the Grace Bridge label. So it's Scotto Cellars, then Grace Bridge. So that's the name of the wine, and it's kind of, there's no other name other than just the Pinot Noir. But yeah, it really hits that sweet spot of something that's not too expensive. I don't know if anyone's had any bad Pinot Noir experiences, but you can spend quite a lot of money sometimes on Pinot and really not necessarily get something that's particularly enjoyable. So you have to choose quite wisely.
Yes, so the grape Pinot, all of the varieties of Pinot come from the French word for pine cone, and the bunch of grapes is a pine cone shape. In biology, all of these wines are all of these grapes, I should say, are mutations of one another. So Pinot Blanc, Pinot Gris, Pinot Noir, they're all the same, but they're all mutations of one another. And it's a very thin-skinned grape, very acidic, very, very tricky to make wine from. And typically you'll pay a premium for a Pinot Noir. And certainly the top reds of Burgundy Pinot Noir, people, as we are currently in our En Primeur campaign, people will pay, pretty stunning prices. Our En Primeur wines start from about £10 a bottle though, but they do go up to £1,000 a bottle. People really will pay. People really will pay top dollar for the very best Pinot Noirs in the world. If you'd like to buy the £1,000 bottles, please stay on the line. But to be honest, actually, Luke's made a really lovely blog on our website about how you can buy a really lovely parcel of Burgundy where you're buying them at sort of £10–20 a bottle. En primeur, which means you have to add duty and VAT to them when they get delivered. Patrick, I haven't forgotten your question. I'll come back to it. But given we've gone past 7:30, I'll just sort of finish off the main section, give people a chance to leave if they're in a rush to go for dinner. I'll summarize by saying we've tasted just three red grapes. I hope it's been sort of an interesting bit of education, but also I hope good wines. If you are driving your Bentley home, your Ferrari or Lamborghini, or even if you're in rural parts, a tractor,
No plow, maybe.
please ask your chauffeur to take you home, because you might have had too much to drink by now. If, like me, you're in your living room with a fake background and the oven on, I hope you have exactly. I can see some heads nodding. Okay. Hope you have a lovely dinner and quaff some of those wines. Session 3 next week of Taste Lab Live will be about sustainability in wine. We'll be dealing with less well-known grapes. The Grillo grape from Sicily, so similar in Italy. Monastrell in Jumilla, an organic wine from Jumilla in Spain. And then the Castello di Torre Elefas Rosso, another organic sustainable wine, again from Italy, but in that case from Lazio, which is the wine growing region nearest to Rome. So I'll be talking more about organic wine, natural wine, all types of wine, making kosher wine, whatever you like, and all the questions you want to flummox us with on the technology of winemaking. We'll cover that then. So anybody who'd like to go away for dinner, please feel my permission to do so. And thank you for joining us. And join us again at 6:30, 18:30 next Thursday. But if you'd like to stay on, I will go on and answer Patrick's question. And please take yourselves off mute and feel free to ask questions. Patrick asks, what are the sulfites for? I got in trouble about this by once telling people that sulfite in wine was like bleach in your loo. And somebody said to me, I should never draw the parallel, okay? But without sulfite, you couldn't keep a winery clean. Sulfites naturally grow on the skins of grapes, and they're the natural bleach. They're the natural thing that keeps things pure and stops bacterial infections. If you've ever had sort of horrible fermented grapes or fermented fruit that's just been allowed to run wild and horrid, it's because it wasn't able to stop its fermentation. And so sulfites are used at limited stages during winemaking to control and stop the fermentation. They're used to clean the barrels. You usually hose them down with hot water. But nowadays, of course, people are environmentally conscious, very, very much so. And certainly we environmentally audit all of our producers. And so we very much recommend the limitation of the use of sulfites. But sulfites, even the lovely Clemens Busch, great maker of Riesling, who we tried last week and whose background is behind me, uses a pinch of sulfites to keep his wine stable, because of course we want them to stay safe and uninfected in the bottle for the years between the time when it's made and the time when you drink it. So sulfites are a purifier.
That's the thing. I think 99 point something % of all wines have sulfites in, and the ones that don't often go pretty bad in the bottle, or at least a very high percentage of them do. And so that's the reason. It's just
and if you're going to be fanatical and say no sulfites, I say so fanatical is a loaded way of putting it. For me, some people have said that there's a correlation between getting headaches from wine tasting and sulfites in wine. And I think, to be honest, when we're dealing with these artisan wines made by small producers, you needn't worry about that. If you've got a headache, you probably drank too much. But the wines that are made in places that look more like oil refineries, they will be much more freewheeling with their chemicals, not our type of producers.
That's the thing. I think on the different labeling as well. So this is obviously from the States. It's in quite big writing here. So yeah, because you can see it really clearly on this label. It's a bit more obvious perhaps than on a lot of other labels. Like you said, and there's this thing about sorry, what's the word, like analogy to sulfur of some kind. I think there's maybe 10 times more concentration of sulfur in dried fruit. So a lot of dried fruit.
Yeah, if you like prunes or dried apricots, they have 10 to 100 times more sulfites than even the most sulfited of wines. So okay. I'm not dismissing it. I'm just saying don't blow it out of proportion. John asks, based on these wines, what should I cook for dinner next Thursday, have something organic, because we're going to be doing organic and biodynamic. Have something vegan in February. I know, but you know, up to you. But
vegan venison stew. I think you're probably
yeah, nice. Good luck with that.
I think seriously though, looking at the wine list, you know, the Jumilla I call one of my great pizza wines. The Grillo will go superbly with antipasti. The Elefas will also go very well with your antipasti. So I think it would be a good Italian meal, or cicchetti or pizziola or something like that. Should the wines be aerated? Joe asks. I don't particularly think any of these needed aeration. I do think, you know, I don't have it sitting next to me, but I've got a nice Zalto decanter. I do think sometimes, you know, putting a red wine into decanter is a good idea, giving it the chance to aerate. I think for me, these wines I put into glasses about half an hour, 3/4 of an hour before we started chatting, and for me that worked. If you've got an aerator, it is quite good, but I'd suggest you use that on your $6.99 supermarket wine, where you just want to quickly sort of aerate it. What aerating does is it oxygenates it faster than you would than it would naturally oxygenate as it gets older. Yvonne asks what red wine to go with an Indian takeaway. I would say it depends on how strong the Indian takeaway is. In the days before COVID, when you could actually go bumming around London to restaurants, we used to do a Tom Harrow, my marvelous co-founder and business partner, used to do something called curry nights, where we take a load of bottles of wine and go around different curry houses and try different courses with different wines. Red wine with Indian takeaway, I wouldn't normally have thought of it as a perfect match. Of these wines, though, I would have thought that the sweetness of the sort of sweet plump fruit of the Pinot Noir would go quite well with the coconut of a Kerala or Peshwari naan or korma, something like that. The Chianti Colisanessi would go best with the bell peppers and with the beef of a good beef Rogan Josh. And the Belle Etoile Merlot wouldn't be a perfect pairing with any of them, I'd have thought. But there you are.
That's the thing. I think people often need the most obvious thing is avoid like really big oak and full. I think oak is often an enemy of curry sauces in general.
Yeah, and all three of these are unoaked, or let's say relatively unoaked wines. I know people picked up that the Chianti Coliseunsi had been in oak, but it's not very oak influenced. You would tell an oak influenced wine by its sort of big grassy nature to it.
I think Sam had a question regarding the wine club.
Yeah, well, Angus, would you like to talk about the wine club?
Yeah, and then Luke, feel free to add anything after if I've missed anything. But basically, the wine club is generally a subscription wine club, so put money in every month, starting from £50. And pretty much, if you're going to be buying wine fairly regularly, it's kind of the way to go, because you get a lot of benefits from that. So you get 10% cash back on each deposit via kind of reward points, what we call pips. So let's say £50, that'd be £5 each month. And rather than it being, you know, one of these subscription wine boxes where you just get sent wines and you don't get any kind of choice in the matter, this is one where you can either go to Luke and I and be like, look, I'd like a case every month or every other month, and we'd put one together for you, or you can literally just log on to our website, go online and pick the wines you want, and then spend your balance on checkout. So it's super flexible. I mean, I guess one of the most important things is kind of our tastings. Like, we love being in front of people. We love, you know, our members, you know, engaging with us. So when COVID wasn't a thing, we used to have things called panel tastings, which are free member events or Premier Cru events. Premier Cru is what we call our wine club. These are free events for members, and we come down, you know, try some wine, drink some wine. We usually have rough themes on it, and usually we're kind of looking to list a new wine. Let's say, this is an example, a Bordeaux, a good value Bordeaux. We'd bring, you know, 5 or 6 of them, single bottles, and we'd let the members try them. And then whichever one was liked by the members the most, that would then come on our list. So our members do actually have an influence on what we list online. So obviously that's not happening per se at the moment. However, we're still holding member events quarterly as well. So there's always a chance to get involved. So yeah, that's a quick, I guess also, obviously you get exclusive offers and, you know, discounts on some offers as well. And you get obviously fantastic Luke and I, you know, at your service whenever you need us.
You get their undivided attention. So I literally get some of the people I look after, Sam, WhatsApping me, sending me a picture of 3 bottles from their wine rack, saying, which one should I have with my rack of lamb this evening? You know, it's that sort of thing. But also, yeah, basically you're supporting us, you're supporting our winemakers. Our club offers are like crowdfunding. You pay for the wine, we then bring it over, so you get the best rates for it. And our club members get first dibs on the wines that are coming through. So basically it's about supporting honest grapes, supporting our winemakers, and we look after everybody. Your money isn't locked up. You know, anybody who leaves, we return the money to them. And we give you 10% of your deposits as pips, so you get an automatic built-in discount.
That's the thing, like Angus said, it's almost, yeah, if you're going to be buying, well, any amount of wine, really be crazy not to take the extra 10% that comes with it if you deposit every month. That's essentially the most obvious tie-in. But the events as well, the tasting events are definitely a big part of it, and helping to choose the wine list, but also just getting to taste loads of wines, and hopefully we'll get those back to normal as soon as possible.
Yeah, let's hope so.
I think people feel amazed when we say we've done over 180 events for nearly 4,000 people since the first lockdown 10 months ago. And it's because we're a wine club. I hate the snobby side of wine. I hate all this thing about people going, "Hey, you've got to change things. Oh yes, you got to. Oh yes, you don't know your Premier Cru from your Grand Cru. Who do you think you are?" I'm far more interested in just sitting around a table, or a virtual table as we are now, enjoying some wine, learning about it. We do everything all the way. You know, this is the more educational end of what we're doing. The masterclass series with our winemakers. You know, it's a unique chance to meet winemakers and the access to people like Angus and Luke, if you're really unlucky, me, to actually get sort of top tips on which are the wines that are worth getting, really. And that's what it's all about for me.
Yeah, exactly. I agree with that. And just think, again, it's just more about thinking about honest grapes, difference to any other wine company or a lot of other wine companies, is to do with like the engagement factor we have, or we try to engage you as much as possible, whether that's being a tasting event or on the phone over email.
We will leave you alone.
It's a bit of fun, not just a drink. Anyway, on that note, any other questions from the assembled Avengers? You all enjoyed yourself.
Does have any questions at all? Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay. Well, we'll be back this time next week. My food is in the oven. My red wine awaits. So thank you very much for joining us this evening. It's been a long old Thursday. We have Friday to go and then the weekend. I've got 3 mostly full bottles of wine to quaff, which will certainly keep me busy. So thank you very much for joining us. Good evening. Yeah, I see, John, you got through that.
That's what I love to see.
Okay, have a lovely evening.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Really enjoyed it.
Yeah. Cheers, everyone.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Cheers, guys.
Bye.
See you, Angus.